We have a legend. We have a legend. I mean, what I don't even. Man, there's so many parts of his legendary status to me before I learned all the other things, all the other attributes to this man that makes him so great amongst the masses. He was a legend to me.
Thank you.
Immortal Technique is in the building.
Real talk.
Immortal Technique, my expert opinion.
Yes.
Let's rock.
We're here.
You know what? I had a crisis of conscience the other day. Una crisis de conciencia. I said, what the fuck happened? He said, there was a beautiful lady that was down the hall that kept hollering at me. This MILF. Right? And she knows I'm married. She knows I got a kid, all this. She don't care. She want to fuck. And in my mind, I was almost like, yo, I'm going to go over there. And then I thought in my head, how did I react when I found out my father was cheating on my mother? Right. And he said to himself, you know what I thought about? I'm going to be honest with you, Felipe. He said, I thought about how he wasn't just cheating on her by spending time with her. He was cheating us at a time by turning his back on me and my brother and my sister to go satisfy his urges that he couldn't control as a man. Right. And he's like, and when I found out, I lost respect for him, and I cursed him out one day, and I called my father a bitch. And it hurt my father because there was really nothing he could say about it, because he knew that his actions were fucked up. He had a family on the side when my mom was here.
So right? He had kids and everything?
You know what I'm saying? He had a child with, not kids, but I'm saying he had a child with the mistress or whatever. Yeah. And he was like, who's to say that this woman won't get pregnant? Who's to say that I won't end up in this situation? And you know what? If my son looked me in the face and called me a bitch or a hoe, what could I say to him? I mean, sure, I could try to discipline him because I'm his father, but am I acting like his father? Or am I acting like a bitch? And that was like, you know, a rare moment for a room where everybody thinks, oh, Dominican niggas are players. No. But like, he was like, nah, this is some real father shit. Like, you have to set an example. And then the lesson became about drug abuse. Like, how about, listen, niggas don't listen. Little niggas don't listen to you say, don't smoke. They watch you roll the L.
Right.
They don't say, oh, don't do drugs. They watch you hustle and say, oh, well, he got some money from that. It's like they don't learn by you telling them shit. They learn by your example and by showing and proving. Like you say, okay,
I think listening to adults just religiously, like, okay, I'm gonna follow everything you say, goes out the window with the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and shit.
But also the fact that, keep it 1,000, like, if you a parent, half of your job is to lie and tell kids that it's gonna be okay when you don't know if it is. Like, how about this? My man was saying some crazy shit. He was like, you know, keep it real. Kobe, the last thing he probably told his little girl was, it's gonna be all right. He had to lie, like every other parent in a plane crash, right? I've been on planes that have fucked up turbulence. Yeah. We flew all the way to Australia. This shit was. I saw a mom hug a little baby, say, hey, it's gonna be fine, don't worry about it. She didn't fucking know. She's not a pilot. Know. You don't know a fucking thing about that.
But what are you supposed to say?
Exactly. You're supposed to lie. So here's the problem. What if someone else assumes that role over you? And here's where I take you down the rabbit hole.
And you see what I'm talking about? This started off as a barber shop conversation.
So the government lies.
Where we going right now?
They like your parent. They lie to you.
Right.
But do you have to have those gentle lies to get through life? To give you peace of mind and stability as a kid? Like when your parents said, we'll be okay, we'll find the rent. They never said to you, hey, listen, I know you're 6 years old and you probably have a lot on your plate, but we may not rate rent this month. Yeah. No. They try to protect you from that by lying about the financial stability of the house.
It's like Men in Black.
It's okay because I'm trying to protect you from some fucked up shit, some monster that's out there in space.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they said exactly in Men in Black. I was watching that shit the other day.
I feel like that would cause like chaos. Panic. If people actually knew the truth.
Yeah.
It would cause chaos.
Because most people can't handle the truth.
Society would fall.
But people know the truth madness. I don't know if that's true. It depends on how it's presented.
Okay, if I said, I'm sorry, we have to allow these companies to poison you people because in reality, if we keep multiplying the way that we do, like this earth is gonna go to shit.
But I think that in many ways, people have already seen that ever present, and I'll say that.
But there's some people that don't.
Right, but I don't mean as an example of that. I just mean an example in general. Like, for example, a bunch of kids get shot in a school shooting here. That's not supposed to happen. But no one's startled by a bus exploding right? Somewhere in Pakistan or Afghanistan, almost, or in Syria, a bomb lands and 30 kids are dead.
Normal.
No one, because it's been normalized, right? Whereas here, we say, well, those kids weren't supposed to die. Why?
What makes us special?
Other kids were supposed to die, right? So I think that's the part of it that they're also introducing us. Also, I'm not trying to get all, too deep down the rabbit hole, but please also remember that the way that Europeans trained African and indigenous people to relate to death is very different from the way we related it for thousands of years.
Right.
African people celebrated their ancestors passing away to meet up with their other ancestors.
Right.
We didn't get that from Black Panther. That was in the culture for thousands of years.
Right.
Yeah.
Indigenous people, they were mummified probably 1,500 years before Egyptians, always in a fetal position because they believed they would be born into some other plane. So we've always had these things. We've always had these recognitions. But only 500 years ago, we got introduced to the fear and the loathing of Christianity, which is, and in many ways, Catholicism, most of us, which is more of a condition than a religion, which teaches you to be afraid that something's going to happen to you. Well, what happens if nothing that you do in life has any bearing on how you show up on the other side? What if you and Hitler are standing next to each other on the other spiritual side, and he's just like, you know what, I shouldn't have done the shit that I did.
Or just saying,
or you say, hey, you know
it was
what?
necessary.
I shouldn't have done the things that I did.
Yeah.
Or this is what happened, and in retrospect, this is how I dealt with anger. Or I was overcompensating for being abused as a child, so I hurt everyone I could in life, and now I see.
Because it's a part of the purpose. Because if Hitler was evil and God created everybody, God knew He was going to create Hitler to be evil, to do the things he do. He was a part of the plan. If you want to look at it like that.
If a person believes in God.
If you are supposed to look at it like that.
Nah, that's what I'm saying.
Which is the other weird part, because under my fingernail live millions of bacteria, right? Some of them may be sentient. They live in a universe where a neutron is the size of the sun, right? And in this tiny fucking universe, some of these creatures may be smarter than human beings. So when they die, is there some ethereal realm for them? Like when you wipe the cold and the shit out your eye in the morning, those are the homes built by generations and generations of dust mites that live in your fucking eyebrow. Keep it real.
That's real though.
What the fuck I'm talking about?
Is there heaven?
We started with a public conversation. You know what I'm saying?
Is there a heaven for them? Is there a purgatory?
Turn it off sometimes.
Is there a purgatory for them? Is there a heaven for them? No. So why the fuck is there one for you?
But how do you know it's not a heaven for them?
You don't.
Exactly. There you go.
Ah!
There you go.
So it's just as plausible for them to have one as you. So if you believe in one for you, you got to believe in one for them. And if you believe in one for them, then the dogs got to have one, and the cats, and then the praying mantises, and all these little other creatures that have been good or bad or whatever. And then you judge morality based on a scale. So then it becomes a question of
people
animal
don't look
versus
at it like
person.
that. Yeah.
Like, for example, when you watch those nature movies, if a man attacked a woman that didn't want to have sex and forcibly mated with her, that's rape. That's looked down on by even the hardest people in our society. Right. But at what point does an animal transfer into that? Like when you watch a lions and they're mating,
they don't have the brain.
female lion may not want to have sex at that
it's too bad.
Is she being violated? That's the whole point. I think we're talking about us moving away from our animal instinct to try to be, more human, which I thought was interesting because that's how battle rap was invented. To move away from the animal instinct of killing each other in the street and beating the fuck out of each other, or murdering someone you love along with the other people because they just happen to be there. And now we're gonna settle this with a battle of wits. Now we're gonna settle this with a meeting of the minds. And I'm gonna crush you here in your head and destroy you. The art of fighting without fighting. That real Bruce Lee shit.
Yeah,
right?
man,
that's what I mean. So I think it's interesting that conflict is played on that stage.
All right, okay. How real was Dance with the Devil?
I could take you to the building in Harlem where it happened. However, I always tell people that I changed aspects of the story, obviously. Like I wasn't on a roof. I never raped a woman, like get the fuck out of here. But at the same time, I felt like because it happened in where I was, and because it was a story that I'd heard constantly, I was like, yo, this is like a ghetto fairy tale.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta tell this shit. But then I realized it's not a ghetto fairy tale. This is a part of this is a part of human history, right? There's never been a song about rape, but at the same time, if we're all alive, here's an interesting thing. We're all related. Every single person who's alive is related because we all have an uncle who never had any kids and a great aunt who never had any kids. So their bloodline died.
Right.
The fact that we're all alive means we come from some branch that's maybe 2,000, 3,000 years ago.
Right.
So every time a man rapes a woman, they're both two people who are alive, and he's raping someone who in some way, shape, or form maybe
Is
2,
related.
3, or maybe 17, or maybe 175, which is a large number, but represents thousands of years, 175 generations. He's raping a part of himself.
Did you expect, like, I'm gonna write this record about this horrible
People will talk about it for
situation,
20 years, 30 years.
and this is gonna be like the breakthrough record of my career? Like,
All right, if I could be totally honest, the part that surprised me is when I got a call, I think it was 2007, 2008, and someone was like, yo, I want to send you some crazy shit. And I was like, what? And they were like, yo, just watch this newscast. And they sent me a newscast from England. I forget what city, it was like Manchester, Liverpool.
Yeah.
And they were called the Dance with the Devil Murders. And someone had stabbed someone. I think it was England, I'm not sure, but it was somewhere in Europe. And someone had basically violated a girl that they were somehow related, I don't know if it was a cousin or stepsister, somebody that was related to, and then had stabbed them to death. And then afterwards, the person found out that they were related to them, and the person took their own life. And they were just like, yo, this is...
and they titled it after your record.
And then someone called me about it, called me from the station. They were like, well, how do you feel about this? And I say, I didn't invent this scenario. I said, this has been going on for years, right? Before me, before hip hop didn't invent rape, right? I said, unfortunately, we're talking about something that we're not gonna get rid of until humanity evolves. Right. We'll still be a primitive species. As long as we're still raping people, we're still a primitive species. We're still a talking monkey. A human being, an enlightened creature, doesn't do things like that.
Right.
And I think that will be that and other things that I see. Killing children at war and thinking that's just a collateral damage. That until we evolve past those things. You know, those simple things. It seems like really simple things. Don't touch nobody that don't want to be touched. Don't force your... They seem like really simple
things.
Fucking things, but you don't get it because you're still part animal and not part divine being. You're feeding into the worst part of what you are, rather than accepting all that you could possibly be.
Right.
So I think that speaks a lot to it, and I think that song captured that emotion perfectly, and also the fact that it was a story about it so graphically with a horrible ending, because that's the only way that those fucking things end.
Yeah, it was like some real.
There's no
Night
fucking
Shyamalan.
There's no happy fucking ending.
Real,
No,
real
but
like
there ain't no
the
happy
end is
ending.
like, damn, that's it. That's what it is.
No,
Damn,
but like I
damn.
said, that's what I'm saying. In life, sometimes there ain't no happy endings,
Yeah.
right? The bad guy doesn't always get his. Sometimes the bad guy ends up president, senator, you know, head of the company. You know, sometimes the good guy, he gets stabbed in the back and framed.
And that comes
you know?
full circle to what
Or
we
he
started
died-
this video
Or he
about.
dies in a helicopter crash and people ridicule his legacy and rip him apart for things that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You had every opportunity to do so. So it could be anything.
Was that your goal with all your projects? Like, because I know you personally, so I know that you take time out to actually do research.
Right.
Like extensive research before you write a song.
Right.
Because you want to be accurate. You don't want to lead anybody astray. You want to misquote anything. You don't want to, you want to be that symbol of, you're going to get the facts from me, whether you like it or not. This is what it's going to be.
I say to people, as true as that is, I always open myself up to learn and be wrong about things and to expand my mind. And I feel like, for me, the journey started a long time ago. Like, mind you, I was born in a military hospital. I came to Harlem when I was super young, right? I never talked like this when I was a little kid. You know, my mom was horrified when somebody called me a nigger for the first time. She didn't even know it was on a white kid. When she found out it was other black people and Latino people, then she had to explain that to me. But I never called myself that growing up. And then someone on the basketball court was like picking teams, and I showed up, and they were like, I got that nigga. I got that nigga. And they pointed at me and they said, you little Puerto Rican nigga, I got you. And I'm like, I'm not Puerto Rican, I'm not a nigga. Like, how?
Yeah.
And I told my mom, and my mom's father is black, so she was furious, and she was like, how dare someone say that to you? And then I explained it to her, and she was like, okay, well, I have to break it down now. Sometimes people use this word. And mind you, I'm like 7 years on the...
I thought this was a bad word.
She was like, listen, sometimes people use that as a colloquialism. They use it to... That's another thing that was interesting in my household. I was never talked to like a baby. I was always talked to like I was an adult, like I had to get shit done. So my dad was super like, he came from the Peruvian military. He didn't want to hear shit.
Where your parents from?
Peru.
Both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was also like a survivalist. So they would take me out to like a river. Obviously not like like a Mississippi River, but like a small like lake or pond, a stream. And my dad would row halfway through. He had like an inflatable boat. And in the middle of the river, he would make me get out and swim. But he would always be near to make sure like I didn't think. He was always made sure I was a good swimmer. And I never put it in my head. And then I realized later on that the #1 cause of drowning for toddlers and kids is not heart disease, leukemia, it's drowning. So how come people don't teach their kids how to swim? You could drown, at a day camp that niggas from the hood got sent to. Remember the little day camp niggas went up?
Yeah.
I remember crazy, freaky shit happened when I was like 8 years old. A girl in the camp, not that day, but the day before we got there, she fell off her bike and she hit her head, knocked herself out, and she drowned in 2 inches of water because her face was in the puddle. You could drown in 2 inches of
You
water.
only need a teaspoon of water to drown.
Imagínate. So it's like, I survived so many fucked up, crazy things in my life. So I think maybe the drive that I had was to just not see people make the same mistakes. I've broken my own heart. I've fucked myself out of money before. Right. I don't like to see, I didn't like that feeling. So I want to make sure other people understand that they don't have to bring that upon themselves. You don't have to torture yourself to write good things. You have to live a miserable life to be creative. You can be creative and be happy as well. Right. You just have to put yourself in the mind frame to be able to do it. Sometimes people think that struggle brings creativeness. No, it's a dedication to the continuation of writing and keeping going. And you have something to prove when you're young. You have no accolades, so you spend more time on the craft.
It's the focus during the struggle. Dig it.
People always ask me the one crazy question, which is how did you maintain the fan base for years without putting out music?
Can I answer this question?
Yeah, because I
think he'd be great at answering that.
No. This is something that he told me real early on in my career. He was like, listen.
See quotes, man.
He said, math.
You gotta do the voice. I didn't talk like that.
You can follow the trend. And the trend may get you money. May get you a whole lot of fucking money. But guess what? The next time another Joe Smo comes up and he's better at that trend than you, you're out of the picture. But if you tell people the truth,
Yo, he made me sound like I'm a villain in a kung fu movie, right? Like, hey,
but
if you don't fucking come over here,
you've done the kung fu villain many times in front of me.
Bullshit.
You've done the kung fu villain many times in front of me. Don't let me talk about that time. Hey, Mav, come over. Let's watch some battles and counting the money in front of me. We could get to that, but anyway, he was like, if you tell people the truth, if you give it to them straight up, you speak from here, you may not have all the people that follow the trend, but the ones that do follow you will follow you forever. He told me that before I went on tour with him. And when we went on tour, every night I watched that whole crowd transform into a line that just wanted to say thank you, buy some merch, have a conversation with them. I'm talking about sometimes we were there longer than the actual show.
Right. That's crazy.
After the show. To the point where like the club owners are there like, oh, man, there's still people here. They still want to buy. They
the
still want to
register's
talk.
still open. You can't stop that. I had advantages other people didn't have. Like, for example, KRS-One would throw a block party and be at my house, and then, or not my house, but my block. And then afterwards, right in front of Grant, the projects, kids were asking him questions. We got to ask Rakim questions. Like, as a New Yorker, we take for granted the fact that we grew up around so many legends, and you can pick their brain, and other people can only do it through YouTube questions that someone else asks. And it's like, I had a first row seat to these people, to Kool G Rap, to Nikki D, to you know what I mean, to Chuck D, to these people who were at the Apollo, because we would just be posted up in front of the Apollo as little kids, like, yo, who's coming in today? I think one thing that I always remember about like that time and the people that taught me it is like I say, everybody looked out, and I felt like there was a big community. And it was also, if one other thing I could bring up that was different from my era is there were a lot of places where everybody would just congregate that were open.
Yeah.
Right? Like Fat Beats.
I feel like we're
People
missing
would
that
just
now.
Be there. There would just be a place where people would be.
The pyramid.
The pyramid. And then afterwards, it was always a marketplace, right? For music, for merchandise. You could get anything.
Right.
And it was just, you knew it was going right to the artist. So it was pretty much the most grassroots thing in there, which is also interesting because when I do go to the battles nowadays, that's something I don't see.
Right.
I don't see enough artists selling music. Once in a while, I see merch.
Like T-shirts outside of concert.
See, that is a lie, though. You know what I'm saying? Thank you for bringing that up. This is another fucked up thing that's wrong with rap and battle rap. I was on 257 stations, right? That carried the news of my arrest. Only 4 of them carried the news of my exoneration. My total thing.
Now, we know what this is about. The people don't know what this is about.
Right. So maybe roughly about 4 years ago,
Right.
I was arrested and charged with robbery and assault
And this is
in
from
Santa Ana, California.
and the situation was
Not the first incident, too. Right. About 2 years earlier, I did an event with people who were undocumented there, and they were workers, and they were city workers, and they were unionized, and this whole thing. And then we were talking about the murders that had taken place in the desert, and how law enforcement knew about the human trafficking, and that they were getting cuts from it, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, outside, they claimed my car was involved in a hit and run, and they towed my car. I went there with my attorney the next morning, just to make sure, because I show up now with the lawyer. I don't show up with goons. What the fuck are they gonna do?
Right.
Fuck the cops up? No.
No.
But when I show up with the attorney, my client needs to know why his car was impounded. We need probable cause. We need the video of why this happened.
right.
What happened? I'm sorry, it was a case of mistaken identity, Mr. Cornell. It turned out not to be a car. Unfortunately, we can't waive the towing fee, so we'll have to charge you the $300 for holding your car in the impound overnight. But there will be no formal charges. Have a nice day. This isn't my first rodeo with Santa Ana. I know how they are. They're one of the most conservative counties in America.
Right.
So me going there and talking about this, me being involved down there with the people who, and I keep it real, it wasn't, this is, everyone who rolls with me is down with this type of shit, even if they not from the same community.
Right.
So take a Poison Pen. He walked through the desert of fucking Arizona with me
Right.
to leave water for migrant families that were rushing and hiding.
Right.
And the person who was also loosely associated, but he was in the Arizona side, not the border angels, which is the people we were working with. Those individuals, they beat a case for that type of shit. So in my mind, I'm thinking, y'all charging me for this bullshit? Like, I know what you're doing. You're ignoring the activist work that I do.
Right.
And you're coming after me for some trumped up charges to make it look like I'm a criminal, like I'm a bad person. When you know that I teach in a prison, you know that I'm not a person out here starting random fights in the street. You know me from the battle scene. I'm always a person that advocates for conversation rather than confrontation first, because I don't want to see too many people kill each other.
Working in prisons, what made you, I mean, you know, teaching and everything. What do you teach and like what
But
made
before you answer that, because
Okay, go
I
ahead, my bad.
wanted you kind of introduced me to that. Where I remember getting a call from you one day, and you were like, "Yo, you know, I do this program for, you know, kids that get in trouble, and rather than go to prison or juvenile detention center, they have to do this program. Would you like to come through and speak?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool." And I met up with you that day, and we went there, and you asked me if I wanted to go first, and I regret not going first because this is a hard act to follow, as you can tell. You know what I mean? And I remember you started speaking to these kids, you know, about values and what society would like them to believe is important, what they spend their money on, what they gravitate to, but what is the actual butter. There's guns and guns and butter. It was kind of like a guns and butter kind of conversation. And I remember you saying to them, "Look at me, like a fucking bum, don't I?" Well, check this out. And you went in your pocket and you pulled out so much money and just dropped it on the table. And I said to myself, I only got $300. How am I going to compete with this? You know what I'm saying? What am I gonna say after this? But I remember how powerful that program was. How do you feel? Because I'm sure it's about, you've been doing this for like 8, 9 years strong.
On and off, almost 10 years. Yeah.
10 years.
So whenever I went to the classes, the way I would captivate people is by teaching them from my failures. I would say, yes, my parents saved up to send me to college from the moment we moved to America. I was one of them kids that got into a really good school, and then I started doing stupid shit, and I ended up in prison, and my parents spent all the money that they had saved for me, and they spent it on a lawyer so I wouldn't go to jail for 10 years like my fucking idiot co-defendant, and I didn't rat on nobody. And I took my fucking lick like a man. And then when they told me I could get out and they said all I had to do was sign a piece of paper, I turned the paper down and I had to see my mom crying and behind the glass and say, well, why can't you just come home? And I said, because Mom, they want me to sign this piece of paper that names other people. And then they'll always keep a piece of me here, Mom, always. Yeah. And I can't do that. And she's like, well, fuck that. It's not about the world, Mom, it's about me. So like I learned these harsh lessons as a kid. I learned what it was like to not have human contact, to be thrown in a hole for 60 days, and then to be thrown in a hole again another 45. For what? I didn't do anything. Right. What the fuck y'all doing to me? And then when I finally began to start like opening myself up to talk to these kids, I realized that, man, they had been through things that I couldn't even imagine. And I realized that the so-called super predators, these scary black and Latino kids, these scary poor white kids, man, all of them were just people who had been physically abused as kids or sexually abused or hurt. And they were doing what they did as a defense mechanism to keep people away from them. Like I always remind people, if the big homies on the block are just talking about all the bitches they fucked and all the money they make and all the things they did right, then they're not teaching you anything. They're just bragging to you. Right. And you a sucker for listening. A person who really teaches you tells you, this is how I broke my own heart. This is how I pushed someone away that was trying to love me and I couldn't accept it because I was hurt and because someone did horrible things to me when I was a kid. This is when I fucking screwed up a job because I was trying to put other niggas on rather than get my situation right. And I let somebody else getting hired fuck me out of a job. Please don't do that. I loaned $10,000 to my brother, and then I realized that you don't loan family money. You give it to them, and there ain't no fucking people giving it back.
Right.
Yeah. You get lessons of the day, and it was like, cool. I had already had some of those life lessons from my master. So I was born in Harlem. I learned to hustle, all these things. But one thing I realized, that I met a lot of people, whether they black, white, Asian, Latino, they were born hustlers, right? Born hustlers. But I never met a person, any race, religion, that was born knowing how to invest. No one's ever born knowing the stock market or knowing real estate. They have to be taught these things. No one's born knowing the alphabet. You learn it not through a numerical scale, through a musical scale. Everything revolves around music. So what I tell people is, when you're absorbing these things, I said to myself, can I stop somebody from falling in? If I stop one person from falling in.
How does this cycle keep being perpetuated?
Well, I think it's because you have very few conversations about what actually causes it, and people are always trying to treat the symptoms and not the disease itself, right? So they try to treat the symptoms. The symptoms are gang violence, prostitution. These are all the symptoms of poverty and inequality of wealth, right? Even a police system, you know, a police system, what it is, it said it on the Dead Prez album, it's true. A police system only exists when there's a massive gap between wealth. Otherwise, you don't need that, you know? When there exists a giant gap between people who have and don't have, then you need to implement a ratio of control in the room.
Yep. Somebody to force you from getting out of line.
Somebody has to be in there, because otherwise people would say, you know, economics, and people get upset, but it's just true. You can quantify it in very brutal ways. Like capitalism, imagine if you needed 3 logs to keep your family warm all summer. 3 logs, just to survive. Otherwise, you're gonna freeze to death. And in my warehouse, I have billions of logs. I could give you 3 so your family won't, because they're just logs. They don't mean anything to me. I'm not gonna miss any of them.
Right.
But you're gonna freeze, and so are all your kids, and they're all gonna die. And I don't give a fuck. And all the logs are mine, and it doesn't matter. Now, when I say it that way, the person who holds the logs sounds like a monster, like the worst person in the world, but that's the smiling guy on TV who you're voting for.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the asshole who's the president.
That's the billionaires
That's the
walking
billionaire
around.
class who exists. I don't care that you don't have enough money to live. As long as I can get some more numbers in this imaginary video game that doesn't even exist.
Yep.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
Countries will starve.
Now, this has been a message
Right.
from you for like a decade.
Right. You would think they would have got it by now.
It's like a decade.
Whatever government exists, at the end of the day, you have to recognize that it's simply just people who rule over other people.
Right.
And they created a bureaucracy or a system in between to give the image that somehow this is all going to run in other people's favor.
Okay.
But it doesn't. It usually there's an old book. I think Robert Michaels wrote it. It's called The Iron Law of Oligarchy. It says that whether a government is communist or capitalist, socialist, social democrat, whatever you choose to be, he said eventually they all fall victim to the iron law of oligarchy. Oligarchy means the rule of the few.
Yeah.
He said if it's a Senate, it becomes a few people in the Senate who control everything. A big Politburo, a communist, now we have a tiny group of people and an inner council. A presidency, sure, now we have a president, and now he has more powers than he ever had before. A king can't rule alone, right? That's an interesting thing.
Needs a hand.
He needs a hand, and the most important hand that he gets is from God. What happens when dictatorship's not enough? That's when monarchy comes into play, where you have to say, no, it's not just that I'm king, it's that God made me king. That's
Or I'm God.
Right, and then people get involved in the control of fear and repression not being enough. It's not enough for a human being, I think. I think the ultimate control is that idea of faith and then what a person actually believes, because I think a human being I've met from all around the world, I've been everywhere, the Middle East, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and all human beings, if I can study their history, are the same. You can keep them enslaved, you can keep them on the ground, but the moment you take your foot off them, they'll stand up and they'll fight against you.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's Britain occupying Ireland, if it's Japan occupying Korea, China. It doesn't matter if
France
it's
or Haiti.
France and Haiti. Right. Eventually, you have to stay down there with the people, because the moment you let go of them, human beings are just wired to stand up and say, get the fuck away from me, get off me. It's like we were bred to be warriors, and it doesn't matter. Even the most calm human being, they see someone being abused in their family, they want to protect them. They have the natural inkling to fight. So you can't just conquer us with that. You have to make us believe in you as an oppressor. We can't just fear you. Right. We have to believe that we wouldn't be anywhere without you. We have to believe that somehow you brought us someone who saved our souls because we were living in ignorance without you. And even if we choose the communist perspective, then we start to believe that our revolution began with a white man in Europe who wrote a manifesto. When you came to the dark jungles of Africa and Latin America to teach us the complex concept of sharing, we knew what that was for thousands of years.
All right. This is crazy.
Here's another funny one. You've heard the phrase Colombian drug lord many times in the American lexicon, but you never heard Peruvian drug lord. Why? We moved 20, well, not we, I'm not. Peru moves 20, about, I would say, between, depending on the year, about 25 to almost 35% more heroin than all the other states of South America combined.
Cocaine or heroin?
Cocaine. The reason that it's not as discussed is because we have Peru has a direct deal with the cartel of the United States. And the Colombians have always had to go through Mexico, which is what gives them all that extra shit that goes along with it. Right. Meanwhile, drop off in the Virgin Islands, drop off at a military base, drop off here, right? When your militaries are like this, it's gonna happen. And at the end, so I'm like, yo, y'all not gonna play that game with me.
Well,
so
no place is actually.
So whenever people run that gambit about what our people have done wrong and the stigmatism against us for selling drugs, we're the middleman, right? I always tell people El Chapo, he was in the news, El Chapo. I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but fine. He's a middleman. He's not the boss. He represents the middleman between the cartels of Mexico and the American cartel. When I say the American cartel, I don't mean a guy with a sombrero and a fucking mustache. No, an American cartel is run by a white guy, a guy who has friends on both, I don't know his name, but a guy who has friends on both sides of the aisle, who has access to legal drug and pharmaceutical companies and illegal stuff. You know, it's not a mystery that we invaded Afghanistan and heroin production goes up 95% to the highest it's ever been. That's not a. That's
For,
not, that's
for
not
those
an
who don't
accident.
know, Afghanistan is like they make a lot of heroin
Right.
out there.
Now they kicked all the drug dealers off the corner so they could sell it at CVS.
Right.
That's where your heroin is. They didn't get rid of niggas because they wanted to get rid of drug dealers. They got rid of you because you were competition for the store. That's it. That's why y'all niggas in the Bing.
Do you feel like they're gonna do the same thing with marijuana?
The other part is how can the government pay its bills with drug money when it's spent the last 40 years locking people up for paying their bills with drug money?
I think that's the flip side,
We
right?
talked about this, and one of the people I've been working with, a professor named Jim Vredos from John Jay College, who was talking about restorative justice. That was the term that him and a lot of people had began to use. And restorative justice simply means that if the state's going to make billions of dollars a year, then those cases need to get wiped. People need their voting rights back. People need to have the strikes that are put against them in family court and the inability to see their kids because of this stuff.
Right.
Those have to be corrected. Criminal cases where people no longer have can't get a job or they have felonies, those need to be stricken from the record. That's what I mean. If they're going to wipe their slate clean,
They should do that for
then everybody else needs it. If they're going to bail themselves out morally, right? Because it used to be a moral failing. That's, oh my God. And don't tell me about the negativity and the criminal history of our people. I will hold up a mirror and show you the criminal history of this country, which is horrific compared to anything that we've had. You want to play that game with me? Okay, Thomas Jefferson.
Oh.
Old school Jeffrey Epstein of his fucking time. Country was founded by Jeffrey Epstein. Don't fucking play with me, dude. George Washington. You know, he didn't have wooden teeth. The teeth he had were the slaves' teeth that he knocked out of their fucking mouth, that he wanted to put in his mouth. Don't play with me. Che Guevara, a controversial figure. What's the difference between him and other people? He actually said, if someone gets condemned to execution, right, they have to face the death penalty, and I gave them that sentence, I'll be in the firing squad.
Right.
Some people found that barbaric. Is it any less barbaric than Arnold Schwarzenegger, who killed Tukey Williams by signing a piece of paper, but didn't have the courage to pull the lever himself?
Word.
What is the difference, right? And I guess that's where you get into
Accountability,
the nuts and
responsibility
bolts
hypocrisy,
of a
man.
human being, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, are you less of a murderer because you ordered it rather than pulled the trigger?
Not at all.
Ah,
However, there's a detachment. It's just like the people who launch missiles from drones
a corporate
are
murder.
not the same as the people who shoot bullets from guns.
Right.
They don't feel the same guilt. They don't feel the same
Like a video
attachment to what happens. Yeah, it's like I hit this button, something blew up.
You can see it, but
You
you
have
like,
to
you know.
face it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting about warfare. Like in the past, in order to go to war, you couldn't go unless a member of your family led it. Like if you were the king, you couldn't just send a dolce. It had to be like your son or you.
Right.
And I think what was interesting about like the development of warfare is that we've been getting farther and farther apart from each other. We started out real close, and we saw what war cost us. You know, arms, legs, limbs, cracked open heads.
Right.
And we didn't learn from that.
I think that started with democracy. That's where the separation started to come. Where we're just the ones making the decisions. Protect our families. We have to make these decisions, but send everybody else out.
But I think, look, it's democracy, or it could be the republic in general. At the end of the day,
Conversion.
you just need some method of control, and people realized a long time ago, we're going to have to control these 400 million people who live in this country. Hate the government or like it. It's an achievement to control 400 million people and have them in the same place and not destroy one another.
Right.
Anyone ever throw a party at their house? And you involve alcohol? You did some clean. No, what I mean? That's some clean. A government got a party with 400 million people going on.
Right.
Right? As much as you hate them or think what they're doing is wrong, I always tell people before we imagine revolution, just be prepared for anarchy and what that costs, because that's insane. No government, no nothing, the full total breakdown. And that's why I remind people, that's why people revere Malcolm X so much, because he was a person who took all those things into account. He was a person that just wasn't doing blind, reckless shit. He was like, yo, they're gonna be consequences. When the revolution finally does start, there will be people who get killed on the front line. There are people who will have to die. There are people who will have to sacrifice. We'll have to find a contingency plan to protect the women and children.
That's how this works.
Right? It's like, oh my God. Now you're talking about the nuts and bolts of revolution, right? I grew up in Harlem, right? I learned to fight in Harlem.
West
not
side?
from random people from the
West
street.
side.
No, from the West Side. And my master was Stanley Thompson, a former Marine, a black Vietnam veteran, definitely had been through a lot of crazy things. And one of the things I remember he told me is, look, would you ever jump in a car that was about to go off a cliff, right? Just to slice someone's face or to punch them in the nose? No, because you'd be killing yourself. And he goes, what do you think you're doing every time you're fighting out here in the street with these people? However, there's another side to that, he told me. And it's not the one that your parents and your guidance counselor, your teacher want to hear. He said, in life, you're going to find someone like that. They may not have hurt you, but they hurt someone you love. They did some terrible things. And you're going to want to get in that car and you want to rip their fucking eye out or stab them in the heart and say, take this fucking with you for what you fucking did to my family or me. Just remember, he said to me, every time you get in that car, you lower your chances exponentially from coming back. So the first time, it's a 50-50 chance.
Right.
The second time, you're playing 75-25. And the third time, you have less than a 15% chance to make it back to your family. And now you have to ask yourself what's worth more to you, revenge or the people you love. And that's the real lessons you learn.
You were filming all that, right?